Welcome to today's webinar titled How Children Grieve. We are thrilled to have Devin Sheehan with us today. Devin Sheehan studied at the University of West Georgia and holds a master's degree in psychology and a specialist degree in guidance and counseling. Over the past 20 years, she has worked with children and adults with a wide range of mental health issues in both outpatient and inpatient settings and has volunteered as an equine therapist for service members, veterans, and their families. She currently works as the resource coordinator for Military One Source. Ms. Sheehan is the proud daughter of a former Army National Guard soldier and lives in the National Capital Region with her significant other, an active duty Marine. Without further delay, I will turn things over to Devin Sheehan.
Thank you very much, Stan, and thank you to the members of our audience today for joining us. Before we begin, I do have a brief disclaimer to read to you. The appearance of hyperlinks does not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense of this website or the information, products, or services contained therein. For other than authorized activities such as military exchanges and morale, welfare, and recreation sites, the Department of Defense does not exercise any editorial control over the information that you may find at these locations. Such links are provided consistent with the stated purpose of this Department of Defense-sponsored webinar. The objectives for our webinar today are to go over the stages of children's grief, to discuss children's concepts and beliefs regarding death, the emotional and behavioral responses that you may see, how to help, special considerations for combat-related deaths, how to inform a child of the death of a loved one, words that can help and those that can hurt, and taking care of yourself. Children most definitely grieve differently from adults. They have a different understanding of death and loss and a different way of processing the emotions that come with that. How children grieve depends on a number of factors, which do include the developmental stage of the child, but also involve the individual child themselves. A child going through a particular developmental stage or a chronological age may respond completely differently from another child who is also in that developmental stage. Also, the circumstances of the loss have an impact on how that child is going to respond. By understanding the grief response during different stages of child development, the caregivers can, in effect, meet the child where they're at and tailor assistance to that child's needs. What are the typical stages of grief that we see in children? This list may seem very familiar to you, either through your own personal experience or through popular culture. The phrase stages of grief certainly has become kind of embedded in our pop culture lexicon, and as a result, these may kind of ring some bells for you. The first stage is denial. Younger children especially may have a very strong belief that the deceased person will come back. Anger. Children may be angry with the deceased, with the adults that are around them, with siblings, with peers, even with themselves, and they'll act these feelings out. Bargaining. Children will offer to be good if the deceased person can come back. Guilt. Children may believe that their actions, their thoughts, or their words actually caused the death of the loved one. And finally, acceptance. The child actually accepts that the loved one is deceased and they're not coming back, and that the child is not responsible for the death of that loved one. It's not ultimately necessary for a child to go through all the stages. They may not go through a stage at all, or they may go through a stage, go on to the next stage, go back to the stage before that. They may kind of bounce back and forth. It's really dependent on what that child is experiencing and how that child is processing. We'll talk a little bit now about the stages of development and how they impact the processing of grief in children. The first is birth to 2 years. What are some of the concepts and beliefs that a child of this age have? First, they have no concept of death. They don't understand what death means. Certainly at this age, they struggle with communicating at all, let alone actually being able to put their feelings into words. A child of a year old is simply not going to have the vocabulary to be able to say what they're feeling about the loss of a loved one. So while they are aware that there is an absence in the family and they're noticing changes in their routine and certainly the emotions of the other folks around them, the adults or older siblings around them, they don't necessarily tie that all together and then tie that into what they're feeling at the time. However, they may feel longing. They may feel that they're concerned about abandonment. They may be more clingy to the adults around them because they do sense that absence and they do recognize something is different and I'm worried that I might lose somebody else. They may be anxious. They may miss the sounds or the smells of the loved one. As a result, some of the behaviors that you may see are crying more than they usually do. Actual physical sickness, usually stomach-related sickness, sleep disturbances, and, of course, physical acting out, throwing things and biting. And again, that goes back to the fact that they simply don't have the ability to communicate how they're feeling. And so the only way that they know how to communicate and know how to get that message across is through physical action. How can you assist a child of this age? Certainly a lot of physical contact for the child, reassuring through that closeness, holding, cuddling, is going to reassure that child that things are going to eventually be okay. Maintaining routines as much as possible while being very patient with the child and understanding that everything is very much in flux for this child and they don't understand why. Also, meeting the immediate physical needs of the child. We'll move on now to 3 to 5-year-olds. While they have a concept at this age of death and loss, they don't understand that death is permanent. The common example here is children of this age are watching a lot of cartoons where things happen to the main character, and even though it seems like death is inevitable for that particular character, they're back in the next couple of minutes and they're perfectly fine. They're not injured. They're not deceased. Everything's okay. And so a child of this age can't really internalize the thought that death is actually permanent. When somebody dies, they don't come back. So they understand that the body no longer is functioning, that there's no life there within the body, but they see it as only a temporary state. They may express curiosity about what the deceased person is doing at that moment. Well, do you think that Dad is out hunting? Do you think that Mom is cooking dinner? What do you think that they're doing right now? What do you think that they're thinking right now? And they may be very insistent that their loved one is actually out there someplace actually doing things. Their fantasies regarding the loss and what that means to them now, as well as what that means to them in the future, may be worse than the actual reality. Children of this age are very imaginative, and as a result, they build up a lot of imaginary thoughts about situations, not only positive situations, but negative situations, such as the death of a loved one as well. And so, as much as possible, these fantasies should be addressed and corrected. Some of the emotional responses that you'll see in a 3 to 5-year-old child: anxiety and worry, that insecurity of what's going to happen now, what has happened, what is happening. I know that everybody around me is upset. I'm picking up on that, and I'm anxious as well. Sadness, because they do recognize that loss. Fear, anger, and irritability, as well as confusion and feelings of guilt. Their behavioral responses can vary widely because, of course, from moment to moment, any average 3 to 5-year-old's behavior is varying wildly. They go from active to completely withdrawn in moments, and so this is something that you'll definitely see in a situation where the child has experienced loss as well. So they may be active and playful one moment, and then they're sad and withdrawn the next moment, and then they circle right back around to being active and playful. You may see some regressive behaviors. They're wetting themselves, they're sucking on their thumb. If they had a particular blanket or stuffed animal that they were attached to but had sort of set aside previously, they may want that item back. They may lose words. They may their vocabulary may actually decrease as a result. They may go back to almost a baby talk kind of stage. They may have repetitive questions about the deceased. Again, going back to wondering what the deceased is doing right now, they may have questions about not only that, but also what happened to the deceased. Where are they? Well, what does it mean that they're dead? They may cry frequently, again, physically act out. They may have nightmares or other sleep issues. And they may actually play act games of death. Children learn through physical action. They learn through playing and art. And so they may actually physically act out these games to more understand what's going on. How to assist these children? Certainly be patient with those regressive behaviors. The behaviors in time will they'll alleviate. Certainly they'll go back to the developmental stage that they were at prior to the loss. The child will regain those skills. So just in the meantime, be very gentle and patient with those behaviors. Give physical affection, nurturing, meet those immediate needs, and also allow them as much physical affection as they need. Encourage them to play and have fun, even if the rest of the family is not in the mood to be running around and playing. This particular developmental stage child does need that physical activity and that play time, because as you can see on this list here, they do learn through play. So giving them that opportunity and letting them work out their physical needs is going to help them process this grief. Maintain their routines whenever possible, and involve them in family rituals whenever possible. That does include a wake or a funeral or any other kinds of family rituals surrounding the loss that would be age appropriate for the child. Children of this age need a lot of repetition, so while they're asking those repeated questions over and over and over and over and over again, certainly answer those questions, and answer those questions honestly with simple age-appropriate language. For 6 to 12-year-old children, they not only understand death, they also understand that death is permanent. They don't have that thought of, well, maybe they'll come back. They experience denial where the younger children do not. They are interested in the actual biology of death. What happens when somebody dies? What happens to the body when that person is either buried or cremated? They want to know the actual details of this. They engage in some magical thinking. They may believe that they did something that caused the death, and that death as a whole is a punishment. So if they got into an argument with a loved one just before the loved one died, and they said something like, I hate you, or I wish you were dead, or they had the thought of, I wish I didn't have to put up with you, I wish you wouldn't nag me all the time. These thoughts are completely normal for children, and if they happen to coincide with that loss, they'll connect that and say, I thought this, or I said this, and now as a result that person's no longer here, and so therefore it is my fault. This age child has some spiritual beliefs and concepts about death, gained either through growing up in a religious household or through external experiences and input from those around them, whether that's they have a general mainstream religious idea of what happens after death, or they have a very tentative understanding. They will start to put those spiritual overtones onto the death itself. While they understand that the deceased is not going to be a part of future events, they also tie that to how this loss is going to affect their well-being. They can have a concept at this age of, Dad's no longer with us, so who's going to take care of us? Who's going to pay for the house? Am I still going to be able to live in my house and go to my school? Am I going to have to move? They have a basic understanding that this loss means something specifically for them. They have what's referred to as a high death awareness. They understand that they now understand that death happens, and they fear that others may die as well. Some of the emotional responses you'll see in a 6 to 12-year-old child, again, that's sadness, fearfulness, shock of the death itself, abandonment, anger and confusion, worry, loneliness. I no longer have that loved one that I was so attached to. So, do I really have anybody? These children may also have regressive behaviors and fluctuating moods. They may be perfectly okay one moment and then crying the next and angry the moment after that. they're going to want to know details about the death itself, and those questions should not be avoided, but they should be answered age-appropriately. They may withdraw from family and friends, and you may see that impacting their grades, their actual peer circle. They may be acting out physically. Again, you'll see nightmares and sleep disturbances, and also because of that high death awareness, they may be more protective of surviving loved ones. They may be reluctant to let others out of their sight, or if somebody has to go to work, they may be very anxious about that person leaving the house. How to help these children? Again, lots of physical contact, allowing them that reassurance through physical touch. Answer their questions truthfully, but again, age appropriately. Maintain their routines. Encourage appropriate expressions of feelings. Throwing things and screaming and yelling might not be the most appropriate way of expressing their feelings, but certainly we have all, at one point or another, grabbed a pillow and punched it because we were so upset we didn't know what else to do. So there may be physically appropriate ways of acting out their fear and anxiety and anger. Help the child find support from friends, relatives, and school counselors. Also make sure that the school is aware of what's going on, and if their homework needs to be adjusted or extensions need to be given, then work with the school in enabling that to happen. Encourage them to communicate and let people know that they're worried or they're having a particularly difficult time. And finally, let them be involved in those family rituals and ceremonies as much as they're comfortable with and as much as is possible. And prior to doing that, actually walk them through what's going to be happening over the next few days. By dispelling the uncertainty of what's going to be happening, by giving them some control and saying, yes, I would like to participate in that because now I know what to expect, it decreases the anxiety that the child may be feeling and the uncertainty that they may be feeling. For teenage children, they have the deepest understanding of the death process and the loss of a loved one. They understand the finality of death. They also may engage in that magical thinking of that their thoughts or their actions caused the death. They're thinking ahead. They understand, my parent won't be there for my graduation. They won't be there to walk me down the aisle. They won't be there to see their grandchildren, ultimately. So they understand that there are going to be a number of life's milestones that are going to come, and they won't have that loved one with them. Teenagers also have that high death awareness and therefore will be very concerned about their loved ones that are still with them and fear that they may die. Teenagers need to be in control of their feelings. They want to express their emotions only to a small select group of folks if they want to show them at all. And so not only do they need that control, but there's also a concern there that by showing these feelings, they're actually coming across as weak. And so they may be less likely to actually open up and share what they're feeling. That goes with this next point of an internal conflict about dependence as well as the desire for independence. They feel like they want that reassurance from their family and their friends after this loss, but at the same time, they want to seem strong and not needing other people to rely on. Again, they have a deeper understanding at this point of spiritual concepts, and as a result may fall back on those as a method of coping. For the emotional responses, again, very similar to what we've seen before: sadness, anger, shock, confusion, feeling guilty, feeling like they've been abandoned, as well as that point of being very self-conscious about being different due to the loss. Behavioral responses, you'll see less of the regressive behavior, but it certainly does still happen. More likely you'll see the withdrawal, the sleep disturbances, the external signs of lacking coping skills, such as they can't concentrate, their grades are dropping, their friends are kind of falling by the wayside, or they're actually getting new friends who are not very good influences. They may not be eating, or they may be eating too much. They may engage in impulsive or high-risk behaviors. How to help teens? Expect and accept mood swings. That's part of being the parent of a teen to begin with, but we need to have some more patience with those mood swings when that teen is going through a loss. If there's regressive behavior, allow it and offer comfort. Offer physical contact, but don't push that physical contact on the child. Encourage expression of feelings, but again, don't force that. They will talk when they feel comfortable, and they just need to know that you're available for them. Any questions that they have should be answered truthfully and age appropriately. They're going to have more of an understanding than those younger children, so they may ask for and need more details than you would provide, say, a 6-year-old. Allow choices about how involved they are in the actual ceremonies of the death and the post-mourning. Be willing to share your grief with them, actually model how you're grieving so that they can see that these expressions of feelings aren't necessarily weakness. It's a way of bringing the remaining family closer together. Watch for those high-risk behaviors and help them find beneficial peer support groups, preferably those peer support groups who are going to have a similar experience that they can share with that child and show them that there are others out there who have had that experience. For combat-related deaths, due to the unexpected, sudden, and inevitably, of course, the violent nature of this particular loss, the emotional impact is potentially more traumatic. So the child is going to be not only traumatized by the death itself, but also due to the unexpected nature and the circumstances around the death. Being on a military installation can be a positive as well as a potentially negative thing, because of course they're surrounded by people who understand this depth of loss and possibly others who have experienced something similar. But at the same time, these children are definitely going to be facing the additional loss of their home, their friends, the school that they're in, because eventually they're going to need to move off the installation. So it's almost kind of a 1-2 punch situation where they've already lost that loved one and now they're going to lose everything else that they're kind of holding dear. If there's any kind of media coverage of the event, particularly for the teenagers who are definitely plugged in virally, and as well as being in front of the television a lot, that can cause some additional stress by having that constantly facing them. On the other side of being on an installation, if the family is not living on a military base, then those around them may not understand what they're experiencing. They may not be sensitive to military culture. Not intentionally hurtful, but sometimes they may actually say or do things that aren't in the child's best interest. By encouraging the child to participate in the military rituals and ceremonies that surround a military loss, they can actually put the loss in a context. They receive acknowledgement of the deceased loved one's important role, not just as a member of their family, but as a member of the military and the importance of that deceased member to the country. They receive support from the military community, and it's a way for the child to feel involved and connected to these individuals. Some overall guidelines, then, for assisting a child who is experiencing a loss. First and foremost, be genuine. Let your genuine concern for that child and your caring for that child show. Be available. Let them know that whenever they're ready to talk, if they need somebody to listen to them or give them feedback or just give them a hug, you're there. Allow the child to express and share as much grief as they want. Nothing is off limits. If they want to say something negative about that loved one, if they're angry at that loved one, let them know that you'll be there to hear that, and that child is free to share that with you. Encourage the child to be patient with their own grief. It doesn't heal overnight. It heals over time. Explain, again, age appropriately, the physical changes that occur after death so that the child isn't having those fantasies that we were talking about earlier of what's happening to that deceased loved one. Are they in pain? Does it hurt? Is it scary to be buried? Is it painful to be dead? Make sure that you're not describing death in terms of they went to sleep, we're putting them to sleep, or they went away. This may lead to fear on the child's part of going to sleep or going on a trip because they hear going away and associate it with, oh, going away means somebody's dying. How do you inform a child of a death? First, evaluate yourself. Take stock in your own feelings and how you're doing, and evaluate that emotional state. If you need somebody with you when you're sharing this information, find somebody who can help you through this. Keep it simple. Small words gets the information across much more easily than a very long, drawn-out, detailed explanation. Use specific language. They died, not they're sleeping or they went away. And allow that child to express their feelings freely while you answer their questions honestly and simply. Assure the child that they'll be safe and they'll be cared for, and explain as much as you can about what the plan is. Of course, in the days immediately following the loss of a loved one, particularly a parent, there may not be a plan in place, and it's okay to say, we don't have a definite idea of what's going to happen, but we know that we're going to be okay, and we'll always take care of you. So, just update the child as the plans come together. Once again, as we said earlier, explain what's going to be happening over the next few days, what that child is going to be experiencing, and give them choices about what to do, what they want to participate in and what they don't. It's always very difficult to communicate with others when they're experiencing a loss, and sometimes we say things and we don't mean to. We think about it later and say, I can't believe that that's what I said at that point in time. So here's a general guideline of some words that can help when you're communicating with really anybody who is experiencing a loss. The first is the most common, of course. I'm sorry that your mom, dad, brother, grandmother died. Don't stop at I'm sorry. Actually fill in the rest of that. I'm sorry that your, insert the loved one here, died. Because saying I'm sorry almost sounds like I'm taking on responsibility for this. I'm sorry that this happened. You want to make sure that they understand, I'm sorry that this happened to you. Ask about the person. Have them tell you their favorite memory. Tell me what you're going to miss the most about them. And have kind of a sharing moment of what that child is most fearful of not having anymore. Because that can open up a dialogue to actually saying, well, I understand that you're going to really miss Thanksgiving dinners, but maybe you can help plan Thanksgiving dinners moving forward based on, what you love the most about what was cooked before. So giving them a little bit of control and a little bit of hope, essentially, that going forward, things aren't going to completely end and we're not going to forget about that loved one. Let them know, I care about you and how you're feeling. Sometimes the simplest thing that you can say to somebody is, I really care about you. Do you want to talk about how you're feeling? Or, I'm here to listen. Or just spend time if you don't want to talk. Some well-meaning phrases that can actually hurt. I know just how you feel. Well, we don't always know exactly how somebody feels. We may have had a similar experience, but the only person who knows how they feel is that person. And so it's almost unintentionally diminishing to say to somebody, I know exactly how you feel. It was meant to be, or they're in a better place. For a child, there is no better place than with them. They're not going to understand the idea that, well, what's a better place than with me? Why would this loved one leave me to be in someplace better, and why can't I be with them? You'll get over it, or don't think about it. Of course they should think about the loss, and they should think about the loved one. And yes, eventually they will accept it, but you never really get over the loss of a loved one. Tears won't bring them back, but, tears may not bring them back, but crying is okay. You're the man or the woman of the house now. That places entirely too much responsibility on a child. It's not age appropriate, and it's not something that they need to hear at the moment. It will be okay. will eventually be okay. Anybody who's been through a loss recognizes eventually you come out the other side and things are different. And sometimes they're okay. But that's not, again, it's not a message that a child needs to hear. When should you seek help? If the child is experiencing significant issues with grief and loss, and they show some of these signs, such as extended periods of sadness, they have no interest in daily activities or daily events, they can't sleep, they don't want to eat, they're terrified of actually being left alone. If their regressive behaviors persist over an extended period of time, if they're withdrawn or they repeatedly state they want to be with the deceased family member or they want to join the deceased family member, if there's a significant drop in their grades or they refuse to go to school at all, these are all signs that you may want to reach out to somebody and get some additional outside help, whether that is through a counselor, somebody in your church or your chaplain, or through your TRICARE benefits. There are a number of organizations out there and individuals out there who are waiting and ready to help you. Something that caregivers certainly need to keep in mind is that they're going through this loss at the same time that the child is. And so as a result, the caregiver is in a place of additional strain because they're making sure that that child is okay and they're helping the child process their grief at the same time that they're grieving. So some tips for caregivers: let your family and friends help you. If your family and friends have no idea how to help you, tell them how to help you. Rest when you can, and as much as possible, maintain a good, healthy diet and exercise. Communicate with others, share your feelings with them. If you need a break, arrange for childcare and allow that to happen. In summary, helping children grieve requires understanding the grief response at different stages of development. Younger children learn and process through play and need lots of repetition. Peer support is helpful for older children and adolescents. Regressive behaviors are normal. Both children and adolescents need more nurturing. And caregivers should seek support and let family and friends help whenever possible. Stan, do we have any questions from our audience today?
We do have a couple of questions. The first question reads, my father is terminally ill, and my son, who has always been very close with my father, has repeatedly said he does not want to go to the funeral when the time comes. He's 10, and I think he'll regret not having the chance to say goodbye. Should I try to take him anyway?
So the child is certainly expressing himself very clearly, and even though as an adult we may look at the situation and say that the funeral and the process of actually saying goodbye is an important part of grieving, the child doesn't have that context, and so as a result, they're going to have an idea of what's best for them in the moment. I would not force your son to go. If he doesn't want to go, then it would actually be more painful to make him. but certainly give him the opportunity to change his mind later. When the actual death happens, when the actual loss happens and the time comes for the funeral, check in with him and see if he's changed his mind. If he hasn't, then make arrangements for somebody to take care of him while you attend the funeral. Leave open the option of, well, would you like to come and maybe sit in the car and have the opportunity to come in if that's something that you want to do later on. Allow him to have that freedom to choose without pressuring him and saying you absolutely have to be there, because it's not beneficial really for anybody to be put into that kind of a situation. And it may be that later on down the line he wants to go to the gravesite, or if there are ashes that are scattered, he may want to participate in that. He may say goodbye in his own way. So the important thing is to allow him to grieve in the way that he feels is best for him, while still giving him the option to change his mind later on.
Great, thanks. The next question reads, my husband died in combat almost a year ago. We have a 16-year-old daughter. Her grades and behavior have not been a problem, but she absolutely refuses to talk about her dad. It's like he never existed at all. She doesn't think she needs to see a counselor or a pastor, but I worry that she's bottling up her feelings. How can I get her to open up?
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry for the death of your husband, and that must have been something that is exceptionally difficult to go through. And certainly my sympathies for your daughter as well. We talked earlier about teens and their tendency to not want to show their feelings and not want to communicate what they're feeling. They may not have the words for it, or they may be so overwhelmed by what they're feeling that they just feel like, if I start saying something, I'm going to not be able to stop, and I'm going to start crying, and I'll just cry and cry and cry, and it'll be embarrassing. So that doesn't mean that she might not be talking to her friends about what's going on. She might not be talking to a teacher about what's going on. I think a question along those lines, maybe not posing the question of, would you like to talk to a counselor or our pastor, but is there somebody that you would be comfortable talking to, or is there somebody you're talking to now? I just want to make sure that you're getting the support that you need. There were points made on the slides earlier about teenagers almost denying that a death happened. Again, it's part of that overwhelming nature of loss and the depth of understanding that teens have about the impact that loss is going to have going forward. So the fact that she isn't showing signs elsewhere of struggling, her grades are okay, her behavior is okay. You don't mention if she's actually withdrawn, it's just that she doesn't talk about her dad. She may be just processing through the best way that she knows how. So leave open with her the option. If you feel like you need to talk to somebody, we have that option for you. Just come to me when you think you need to. And also let her know, I really miss your dad and I'd like to talk about him sometime. Is that okay? And see how she responds to that. Is she okay with you talking about him and not necessarily relying on her to say anything? She may want that dialogue opened up in a different way. And you may want to, if you haven't already, seek the guidance of your own counselor or seek the guidance of your pastor in addressing how you can open up that dialogue with your daughter.
Thanks, Devin. At this time, we don't have any more questions that have come in. So I would just like to thank you, Devin, for sharing your invaluable experience and expertise. I would also like to thank those attendees for participating in today's webinar today. If you find yourself having questions after the webinar is over, please email moswebinars@militaryOneSource.com, and I'll get the questions over to Devin, and we'll get an answer back to you as soon as we can. This concludes today's webinar on How Children Grieve. Thank you all for attending, and have a great day.